Hey everyone. In this video, I want to dive into choosing your first AI workload, as artificial intelligence has become really a must-have capability for most industries. Well, if I'm a company that has not yet implemented AI, it can be very daunting on getting started. What is the right first workload where I can use this generative AI capability? So that's what we're going to look at in this video, picking the first generative AI workload. And that's a key point here. I'm focusing on generative AI, where some new creative content is made by the computer, commonly text, but it could be images, video, audio, based on natural language interactions. But don't limit yourself to thinking that is the only type of AI. There are vision capabilities, there's speech to text, there's classifications, there's machine learning. There's so many different things that could be the right solution depending on what you're trying to solve. So don't think generative AI is the answer. Depending on what you're trying to do, one of the other types of AI may be a better solution. But for this video, I am going to focus on use cases where this new tool to our tool belt, and it is a tool, it's another type of tool that we now have available to us. So what type of workloads, what types of problems I'm trying to solve does this new creative ability help us with? And it is that creative, that potentially interactive, conversational ability that these computers now have that opens up a new type of scenario and scenarios where we can leverage it. Now, before we even talk about the workload, as an organization, I have to be prepared. I have to be ready for this new tool, for this new creative entity. And honestly, the first one is something we always have to do, but it's employee skilling. Yes, the developers. The developers have to have access to the right tools, the right environments, the right knowledge to not only understand the options for choosing a model, for interacting with the model, but also for the wider integrations they're probably going to have to do with my data, with my tooling, with other agents, the different protocols that are available. But it's also my governance teams, my operations teams, my monitoring teams, my security teams, my legal teams. The list goes on and on and on. The end users, what skilling is potentially required for the end user? What learning paths can I make available? What options can be made available for all the different people involved? I have to think about my data readiness. One of the huge things that happens whenever we talk about AI is, well, it's going to nearly always want to use data. And so our organization has lots and lots of data. And what's happened typically is that data has not been permissioned maybe as strictly as it should have been. The sharing of it has been a bit generous. And it's been okay because people couldn't find it. It was kind of a security by obscurity. But as soon as I start attaching these new types of index that help the AI applications go and find data using natural language, well, suddenly it's going to find things that people have access to very quickly, very easily, and will expose it. And so ensuring my organization has done a good job on the data estate is really something we have to do before we start applying these new indexes and applying these artificial intelligences on top of it. Now, the next big thing we have to make sure as an organization is, remember, these generative models are creative by nature. They are non-deterministic. That means the same input will not yield the same output every time. So we have to have very strong content safety mechanisms in place. I don't want it talking about things it shouldn't. I don't want it accepting instructions and doing things that it shouldn't. I need very, very strong content safety. I also need very strong evaluation capabilities, because if it's generating this creative content, the way I previously did checks on things, I would validate, hey, it's performing as it should. I can't just run it through a test script and check the output. That won't work anymore. So I have to have new ways to do quality assurance that the output it's creating is of the correct type, is of the correct tone. It's meeting the requirements. We need new ways to not only do content safety, but to evaluate how my AI application is performing. I also need to ensure things like responsibility. There's no bias. Everyone is treated equally. So I also think, hey, I have to have some way to validate I am doing responsible AI. And of course, on all of this, I need governance. I still have to be able to validate the all-up solution, that I'm meeting the requirements of my company, of regulations, that all of those things, they still apply to these brand new creative solutions. Now, given this creative nature of AI, there are many common use cases. We hear about summarizing large volumes of text. So, hey, AI, here's a document. Create 10 bullet points for me, or create a PowerPoint from this. Or, hey, here's a transcript of the meeting. What are the key points of the meeting? What are the action items for me? I can create these conversational chatbots. They could be internal. Imagine a HR bot. Hey, all my HR policies. I give it the manual, I give it the PDF file with the manual, and then let employees just have a natural conversation with it. Could be external. My product catalog, well, now my customers can go and chat with it. It could be a coding assistant, writing code, debugging code, helping to understand code, go and handle this particular pull request. Non-developers suddenly do vibe coding. They can just talk to it, and this code springs to life. I might have some data set. Hey, go and draft a report. Maybe it's performing deep research. There are new reasoning models. The list goes on and on and on. And so with all these different types of examples, how do I, as an organization, pick what's the first one that we should do? Because the first one's really important. The first one kind of sets a tone, but the first one also in a lot of ways is going to prove to the board who are agreeing and funding these things, hey, this AI thing is actually worth it for our organization. So as we think about the key factors, and I'm going to drill into each of these in more detail, but I think the most important thing is tangible business value. There has to be a measurable way to demonstrate the impact that this first AI workload has to my organization. I also have to think about, well, for this system, what is the data it will need? And so what is the data readiness I have related to what would be needed for this project? I obviously want it to succeed. So I don't necessarily want to shoot for the moon on this first one. So I'm going to think about, well, what is the technical feasibility? I don't want some super ambitious, overly complex first project. Remember, it is creative. I want to build confidence as an organization that I have the proper controls, I have the proper governance, I've done the right data security. And so for these first projects I'm going to do, I want to start safe, but I want to ensure that I have the expertise, I have the infrastructure, I have the things in place that this is not going to run off the rails or it's just too complex and I fail to do it. I want a use case that has minimal ethical implications. Because remember, suddenly it's this creative intelligence creating an output that maybe is being acted on, that is being considered, is going to be used to make some decision. And so responsible AI is super important. So my first project should not likely be, do I approve this loan or financial aid or this medical care? It shouldn't be human life impacting, most likely. I don't want huge ethical considerations that I have to deal with. Not ideal. And I do have to consider when I think about the scale. If it is successful, can I scale it? What is the return on investment for the cost that I'm going to have related to this? And this goes back a lot to that measurable business value. There's going to be a cost associated with creating the AI app. There's going to be a cost associated with running it. Well, those costs, how do I offset them against the value it's bringing to the business? And also, as part of all of these, as I start my project, I'll make sure I have mechanisms to capture what went well. There are going to be things that don't go well, but I want a mechanism in place to capture that. So then I can share it with other teams. So that knowledge doesn't just live within a tiny silo in my company, because we're going to want to encourage experimentation. We're going to want to encourage sharing of that gained knowledge. So for each of these, let's dive into it in a little bit more detail. And I want to circle back firstly to that business objective. I have to align with my business. It is the most critical consideration. I want to be addressing a real business need, solving a real problem. I want it driven by clear business value, not just, ooh, we have AI in our application now. Don't do AI for the sake of doing AI. When I think about using this business value, so let's think about, I want a real need. Now, when I think about a real need, what does that mean for a business? So I could think about revenue. And a real need would be making that better, more money. I might think about costs. So I would think about reducing my costs. And I may think about my experience for the customer. Or maybe it's even experience for my employees. And I would want, I want them to be happier. There'd have to be some way to measure that. Remember, everything I do is measurable, which leads to the next thing. I need to be able to measure it. It's no good having real needs if I have no way to measure that. I need to be able to say, oh, well, my customer satisfaction score has risen 10%. Maybe I'm using AI to measure sentiment. Hey, after implementing these changes, I can see the sentiment about our organization has risen 20% in the positive. I would want to think about, hey, I want this business value. What is the urgency? What is the impact? I want a quick win, ultimately. So for our first project, it is very beneficial if I can show the board this quick win. I have this measurable benefit, and ideally, I want to be able to show it in a fairly short amount of time, which is going to come to this technical feasibility. I don't want to get stuck trying to solve it or it fails. I want to have a safe, measurable, impactful first project. I do have to think about the risk. I want a manageable level of risk. Now, it could be customer facing, it could be internal use. If I accelerate or simplify some internal process, well, that means less employee time spent on that function and more customer value. I talked about the employee HR system. Well, if before the average time from start of interacting with the portal to completion was 20 minutes searching around the HR site, and then when I apply this HR bot assistant, and now the average interaction is 5 minutes, and I've got maybe a measurable little thumb up, thumb down to measure, hey, was this actually successful? And that's 5 minutes. Well, that's 15 minutes saved. I can measure those interactions. And I also have to make sure, and this seems like an obvious one, will it be used? Because if it might be fantastic and super and awesome, if no one uses it, it's not that super or awesome. Are people going to resist this change? So I have to think about something that will be attractive to the target audience for this AI workload. I want them to want to use it. I want them to be able to see the value to them and not resist it. So bottom line, I want a project that matters to the business. It's addressing a real need where I can measure the success. It's going to be used by the target audience. So then noticed by the leadership who are going to say, yes, let's do the next project and the next one, etc., etc. The data. I mean, I have to make sure the quality of the data is high. Garbage in, garbage out is a well-known thing. Any bias in my data will be amplified by a generative AI. If I have gaps in the data, if I have unclean data, it's going to cause problems. I have to go for a data hygiene exercise. I have to make sure those permissions are correct. So I cannot have over-permissioning. I cannot have oversharing. I need to fix those things before I start applying a vector database over it that lets me use natural language to go and find things. It's going to get exposed super, super quickly. And where is the data? Because I'm going to want to be able to interact in a very efficient way with it. Most likely, I'm going to want it near to or have the ability to mirror or synchronize to where we're running these generative AI capabilities. And that's going to bring us to what is technical feasibility. There's many aspects to this, but one of them is my infrastructure, my skilling. Most companies are going to leverage cloud providers. Large amounts of GPU. Maybe I'm doing fine-tuning for many, especially for my first workload. I probably do not want something where I'm having to fine-tune models. But I still need to run these very large language models. So I'm going to need probably the cloud. I'm going to use the cloud to run these large language models. Maybe I can use a small language model. Maybe I can run some of those on premises. But most of the case, hey, how does that fit in my infrastructure? How does it fit and get used in my existing tech stack? We have expertise. We're using a certain set of capabilities. How does this AI fit inside that? You're going to have data scientists, machine learning engineers, prompt context engineering experts, DevOps, machine learning operations. The list is going to go on and on. So there's a whole set of experts that I'm going to need to do these things. If I'm new to AI, which we're assuming we are, then the safe option is going to go with a simpler implementation, a ready-to-made API, a model that has capabilities, that things like content safety, ways to evaluate the output. So most likely what I want to do is just start simple. You have a partner, you look at their capabilities, look for content safety, look for evaluation frameworks, look for model selections, look for nice, simple ways to interact. I don't want to be inventing the wheel on my first go round. And how does it actually go and hook into my existing experience? I don't want a silo. I want it to be a natural. Again, we want to think about, will it be used? I don't want some completely isolated thing. What is the current experience? Can I build into that as a natural extension? If currently people are using Teams, for example, hey, how can I easily make this go and fit into my Teams experience? If they're in a website, how do I make it fit into my website? And make sure you have time and budget. Like, consider, what does this mean on an ongoing basis for actually running these things? And the ethics. I mean, this is so important. You have to consider the scenario. What are the implications if there was a bias, a lack of fairness? Is it working with very sensitive data? So I want to think not sensitive data. For my first one, it's very unlikely I want to be dealing with that. I want to pick something that is safe from those ethical considerations. You're going to need a governance process for the AI, but ideally your first project should minimize the amount of governance I need for compliance reasons, for ethical reasons, and it definitely should not be life impacting. And then the scalability of this solution, the cost, the return on investment. We have to ensure we can show the cost benefit of our solution. It must have those very, very clear success metrics. Now, I've seen different numbers on these things. Like I've seen people talk about, I think the latest one is for every dollar you spend, I think there's a return on investment of like $3.70, which sounds phenomenal. And yes, we should throw tons and tons of things at AI, but it's not a guarantee. I'm sure for many successful projects, there are ones that are not successful because they've not done the right setup. They've not done the right investigation. They get stuck on this technical feasibility. But if I want to be able to have a first workload and show that return on investment, I have to have clear success metrics that can be measured to help show that positive ROI. So when I think about success measures, it could be X hours of time saved for these roles who are the target for this AI app. It could be Y% conversion of online interactions to sales through better customized content and communication. So I'm going to see a higher conversion rate when people go and interact with my site. It might be handling Z% of support calls by AI. It likely will not be a sparkly, a sexy first thing, but it wants to address a real use case. One of the great ones I've seen many times, actually, are companies have to respond to RFPs, the request for proposal. And when you get an RFP, they've laid out 200 questions that you have to go through and respond to. They're worded differently. They might address different aspects of those things. Maybe as a company, I spend massive amounts of time going and researching an answer for every single one of these. And I've done thousands of these. Well, think about that as it's not a sparkly use case. The customer wouldn't even see it. But for your internal people, suddenly I could use a generative AI that could use a database of previous RFPs that were successful and pull in that as source and then generate a response to each of these. It's a draft. A human then reviews it. But it's taken away a huge bulk of time that was very repetitive, that was very laborious, and it was probably had some error proneness to it because it's so many things and looking at all of things. So that could be a really good item. So that was somewhere that you're spending a lot of time researching, and the human is still part of the loop. So from a safety perspective, it's quite attractive. I've seen examples of help desks where the customers called in, and what they do is they have the AI doing voice to text transcription and then automatically looking up pertinent information from the knowledge base. So the human agent is actually getting prompted for, here's some example solutions. Try asking this. This might help them. So it's going to accelerate the success for the customer, solving their problem, reducing the overall time of the call. So you might measure, so I'm going to be able to have a measurable success metric. What's the average time of a support call now? You might even take the next step and use it as the AI might suggest, based on the customer's previous interactions, other things they've bought. This call, maybe they'd be interested in this service. So suddenly maybe I can start to measure the number of upsells you get. So when I think about this scale, this ROI, if I have a task that is performed a lot, if it's repetitive, can we automate it, like those RFPs? So automating the routine is a great place to start. So I think about, okay, is it repetitive? That might be a great use case. If I have something that has to process a really large volume of something, there's lots of requests, there's lots of interactions, well, that might be a great use case. So the number and the type interactions. If there's some process performed that requires, and I've actually seen this, jumping around lots of different systems. Maybe it's like an inventory and checking inventory and the pricing. So I go to an inventory system, I go to the supplier system for pricing, I go to the amount of orders I'm doing. So I'm jumping around different systems. Well, if there's an API, if there's computer access available, that can be a great use case. So if I'm dealing with multi-systems, that can be a great place to start. And I mentioned, like, if it's error prone, when I have things that are repetitive, as a human being, we get bored and we make mistakes. So if I have some process that is error prone, my generative AI assistant buddy, providing I've done the right things in terms of the governance, making sure it's grounded in real data so it's not hallucinating, well, that can be a fantastic place to start. So as an organization, what I would typically do is look at where are my employees, where are my customers spending a large amount of time? Would a generative AI assistant expedite that? And so if I look at each of these 5 things, and I could almost imagine if there was a circle going around every single one of these. If I had this circle going around every single one of them, what am I looking for? I want to be here. I want to be at the intersection of those. I want my first workload to have a very clear, measurable, impactful business value. I want to make sure it's going to be used by the target audience. I have the data ready. It is technically feasible in a minimally ethical compliance space. And I will be able to scale and show the return on investment of this. That is what I want. That's how I pick my first project. I look at these factors and I look at the intersection of those. I'm going to experiment. I'm going to learn. I'm going to iterate. But if I choose that thing that addresses that real business value, and I'm not trying to shoot for the moon on my first thing, I look at these things, I look at where time is spent, and I play in that safe area, that's going to be a really good first workload. Now, we still want to minimize risk. So when I think about introducing this creative generative AI buddy, I can grow those types of interactions. So one of the things we will very, very often start with, so I think over time, and the types of interaction I'm going to have, it's like anything. We want to build trust and confidence in the thing. So most often our first AI workload would be an assistant to a human. It's interacting with them, it's giving some information, it can help accelerate something, but the human is constantly in the loop. They're constantly validating, they'll see if there's a challenge. So I can build confidence because a human is constantly in the loop. Then I might progress to more of it's part of a human team. It has some responsibilities that it is producing certain things, but then it still goes to the human team, but it's got a bit more autonomous nature to it. It's creating some things, but there's still humans as part of the loop. And then once I've got a lot of confidence, well, I can start having these agents, these autonomous agents that just are event-driven. Something happens, it goes and does the certain task. I still have to have super strong governance, super strong evaluation to ensure it's still running to purpose. all of the times as part of my processes, I'm going to have these because new models are going to come out. You're going to upgrade the model you use with your processes. So every time you do any kind of change, I need to be rerunning those constant evaluations to make sure it's still performing to purpose, because I've seen pretty big changes in the outputs as I put in a new model. So we covered quite a lot of different things, but really the key thing to think about is start with something safe. I want a nice, safe, tangible business value that addresses a real need, that is a fairly quick win, that isn't shooting for the moon. I don't have some massive data governance and permissioning things. It's not ethically questionable, and I'm going to be able to clearly show the return on investment. It's got very clear success criteria. And hey, it's probably going to be a human assistant in some way. So you've got that human in the loop, which again gives you that confidence, and you can build from there. I hope that's useful, and huge good luck on your first AI workload.